Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, along with Xavier McKnight, and we have a new guest to the family, and that's Nick Bartlett. And I met Nick through Twitter. And Nick, why don't you give the audience an opportunity to let you know who you work with, and we're glad you're a part of our team.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott. So, as Scott mentioned, my name's Nick. I'm a senior writer and producer of multiple podcasts over at Sports Pac-12 Magazine. I'm also a staff writer for OregonSportsNews.com. And through that site, I've had articles featured on the Seattle PI, Oregonian, and a bunch of other websites. So very excited to get to it, and let's have a good conversation about the NBA today.
Absolutely. And Xavier McKnight, go ahead and let everybody know who you work with. Of course, you've been with me for the better part of 2 years, so at least close to it. So, Xavier, let everybody know who you're working with, and then we're going to go into our NBA broadcast.
All right, yes, as usual. Good evening, everyone. As always, thanks for having me, Scott. Welcome to our family, Nick. And I am a digital content producer with WWSB, ABC7, and ABC affiliate in Sarasota, Florida. And I am a member of multiple podcasts here with Scott here on our network here. I'm a usual guest here on the Sports Exchange. We have a show that we do on Friday night, every other Friday night, The Real and the Rare, where we discuss non-sports and sports-related topics, but you will be hearing more non-sports-related topics coming up from us very soon, especially after the turnout that we had on last Friday's podcast. But, you know, as Nick said, we're here to discuss some great NBA content here tonight, and we have a number of places we're going to go with this discussion.
And with that said, Xavier McKnight, lead off, and you're going to drive the vehicle today, and I'm just going to make sure that I don't crash it. Just kidding with you.
Well, for sure, and, well, we now know that the plan for the NBA to come back is now set for July the 30th or July the 31st. It has not been a definite yet on when the exact day is for the players and the coaches and the gameplay to resume. The initial plan was July the 31st. Now we're hearing talks of July the 30th. They're set to come back in a destination in Orlando, Florida, very close to Disney World and a sports complex. But in wake of many recent things that are happening in our country, the fact that we are still in the midst of a global pandemic and the numbers continue to rise, and also the fact that America is just not in a very good place right now. We still are dealing with racism, police brutality, social injustice, and the voices of the masses, they are done being silent. They want to be heard. And now we have celebrities and athletes who are standing up on the front lines for the cause, most notably in particular in the NBA, being led by a players' coalition led by Kyrie Irving, the Brooklyn Nets superstar, and other notable names that have been included in that coalition: Kevin Durant, Avery Bradley, Dwight Howard, Bradley and Howard, who also just so happen to be two teammates of one of the staunch oppressors against this Players Coalition movement and what they are taking a stand for, and that would be Mr. LeBron James. So for those of you who are not familiar, I'll just go ahead and refresh you. Last Friday night, we started to learn reports from multiple sources that Kyrie Irving had a player coalition that was led by at least 150 to 200 players who were not in favor of wanting to play. Now, it should be noted, before I go any further, Kyrie Irving was initially not speaking on this matter. He initially was not talking on this. The players, they felt that their voice was not being heard by the president of the Players Association, Chris Paul, who is also one of the best friends of LeBron James. Why do I keep bringing up LeBron James, ladies and gentlemen? Because back in May and late April, we heard that LeBron James, and we saw that LeBron James, rather, came out on Twitter. And when we kept hearing rumors about the NBA might not return this year, LeBron James came out with a tweet basically saying, well, no one has told me anything about that. My team and I are ready to go. we're going to play if we can play. And he signed off on that by using the clown emoji, basically to continue to show the world that I am the king and what I stand goes. Well, new developments are now coming out, and a player coalition is being led, as I said earlier, by Kyrie Irving, and most notably other names like Avery Bradley and Dwight Howard, and a little of Kevin Durant in there. He's not saying much, but he has had some things to say in the past few days, and we're going to touch on that as well. But these players are not in favor of playing for one of two reasons, if not both of them. As I stated, we are still in the midst of a global pandemic. I know that there are some people out there who seem to have forgotten about that. Scott, you and I live in the state of Florida. We know that the beaches are opening, and we know that people are going out to the beaches. And we have people who are not properly practicing social distancing, standing 6 feet apart from each other. They are not necessarily wearing masks or face coverings when they are out in the public. And I want to go ahead and just bring one very attentive thing to everybody's attention right now. Overnight in the state of Florida, there was an increase of COVID-19 cases of 3,207. That is the largest amount of cases in the state of Florida that has happened in a 24-hour period. And this is noted after last week where there was a rise of 2,500 cases overnight in the state of Florida. And I say all this to say that the players don't want to play in the midst of a pandemic. Oh, I definitely understand that, because there are definitely some things out here that we are not being told the truth about. We keep being told that they feel that they have this thing under control or not. And it should be noted that the numbers I just listed, those are not deaths. So it's not equivalent to deaths. There were 43 deaths overnight. Every death is absolutely unfortunate here. But I understand that there are more numbers in the cases as opposed to more numbers in the deaths. But there are still great risks here. And we're going to talk a little more about those risks a little later on in this show. But if players don't want to play in the midst of a global pandemic, I absolutely understand it. I get it. They don't want to put themselves, they don't want to put their families, they don't want to put anybody else at risk. After what happened with Karl Anthony Towns' mother, God rest her soul, for those who don't know, she passed away earlier this year as a result of COVID-19. And that really opened up the eyes of many of the players around the league, many of the coaches, and many people in general in particular. I mean, we have to keep this in mind as well. It was the NBA initially shutting down a game between the Jazz and the Thunder because Rudy Gobert had tested positive for COVID-19. Now, at the time, we didn't know that he had tested positive for COVID-19. That news came out about an hour afterwards. But after that news came out and the NBA announced they were suspending their season, that's when we started seeing everything in the world of sports pretty much just shut down. Because we were a little than a week away from the start of March Madness. That was completely put to a halt. Golf was put to a halt. Tennis was put to a halt. The MLB was put to a halt. The MLB was in the midst of getting ready to wrap up with spring training. It was pretty much over at that point. And now we're starting to hear discussions of other leagues that are getting ready to open back up, including the NBA. But the pandemic is still out there. I know I sound like a broken record right now, but I feel that it's very important to stress that to everyone out there who feels that because things are opening back up and businesses are starting to slowly boom and rise again very slowly, that everything is now going back to normal, and it's not. The pandemic is still out there. The numbers are still increasing, and there is still a great chance that we could see a second wave of cases. So if players and coaches and others around the league don't want to come back in Orlando or come back at all in the midst of a pandemic, I understand that. I also understand that if players don't want to come back in the midst of fighting for social injustice. And I understand those who want to say we can play and we can also use our platform. I agree with that too. But I also agree with those who want to continue to go out there and stand on the front lines with the rest of the masses who want to help bring change to America, who want to help solve systemic racism, who want to help bring an end to social injustices and police brutality in America. And as I said last week on The Real and Rare to close out our show, everyone needs to understand who is going to be standing on the front lines of this. This is not going to be an overnight process. This is going to take time. The solving of the pandemic is also not going to be an overnight process. Now, I say all this to say, I understand that the league has to make money. There are players who have to get paid. And I understand the position that many have who have said, well, it's easy for Kyrie to say that because he's a superstar in the league and he's already made money. I get it. I get that there are players out there who are still living paycheck to paycheck. I got that. But right now, we need to take the concerns of the more serious matters that are going on in our country into all seriousness that we possibly can. With the police brutality, with the social injustices, with the fight against racism, and also with the pandemic. We need to take all of that into consideration. And I don't have a problem with players who want to come out and play. I don't have a problem with the fact that LeBron James wants to come out and play. He wants to play. He wants to win another championship. He's toward the end of year 17. His window is closing. This is the best chance he's going to have of winning a championship with the Lakers anyway. Kevin Durant's out. Klay Thompson and Steph Curry are out. Things are different right now. Those guys come back next year. It's going to be a different league. But what I have a problem with is when LeBron James comes out and says, my whole team is ready to go. Avery Bradley and Dwight Howard play on your team. And they have come out themselves, out of their own mouths, not being spoken through by Kyrie Irving. We've heard Dwight Howard and Avery Bradley say this themselves. They feel that it is important to continue to not play right now because it would be a distraction. And I get that to a degree because the main job of these professional athletes is to be entertainers for us. It is to entertain the masses and to distract us from what's really going on in the world. But I just have a problem with LeBron James doing that. And the other bigger problem I have here, and I want to make this known right now, Scott and Nick. Scott, as you know, I am not the biggest Kyrie Irving fan in the world as far as some of the stances that this guy has taken, where he has wanted to be on the front lines for. I'm not a proponent of him coming out and saying the earth is flat and some of the other things that he said here. But I'm with him 100% on this because he's standing up for what's right here. And none of the NBA owners have come out and said anything in support of their players. And if you really want to ruffle things up, you start messing with the economics of things. When you start messing with dollars and you start messing with the money, that'll start bringing change. One of the most effective movements of the civil rights movement were the boycotts that were taking place because they were taking money out of other businesses. Businesses that relied on them, relied on their revenue, but did not want to treat them equally. That was one of the most effective parts of the civil rights movement. That's what really helped get the ball rolling with that. That's what really helped lead to policies being changed. And, you know, before I go any further with that, Nick, Scott, would you guys like to chime in on this so far? Because I know I've gone off on a tangent on this so far. But there's a lot to be unpacked here. Some of it that we're not hearing through the other networks. Some of it we're just hearing bits and pieces of. But Kyrie Irving has been very highly scrutinized this week. And this is one I feel that many people need to take a step back and actually understand what he and those other players in the Players Coalition are trying to say here. It's a lot bigger than trying to just go back and win a championship and a ring. And before you guys chime in, I also don't believe this is Kyrie Irving trying to prevent LeBron James from winning a fourth championship. I believe that is absolutely petty, and I believe he is not about that right now. I don't believe Kyrie Irving's thinking about that at all. Guys, your thoughts.
All right, Nick, go ahead.
So for me, this whole Kyrie situation is very interesting because I don't know exactly why he's saying this. I think that obviously if he is fully in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, that is something I take a lot of pride in. Obviously, Seattle usually takes some sort of forefront on these issues. So I am fully in support of that if that is his primary concern. The thing that's a little bit fishy to me here is the fact that 2 or 3 weeks ago, you didn't hear anything about this. It seems like he said this once he found out he couldn't participate in this potential 8-game, whatever bubble type NBA season is coming up. And so I want to know, what is exactly his goals? When you have a Dwight Howard or Avery Bradley, to me it feels like they're doing this from the bottom of their heart to really help a fight that's been going on forever. And one thing I do want to touch on before I dive a little bit more deeper in the NBA, I really agree with everything that's been said so far. And the one thing that Xavier said that I really think stood out is racism, as well as the coronavirus. So right now we're talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, is not going to be eradicated overnight. This is going to be a multi-decade, if not hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of year fight. Racism is something that's sadly in most cultures in some way, shape, or form. So I just want to really quickly say that. But hopping back now to the NBA, there's multiple ways to look at it. And as a white male, I couldn't tell you what is the exact right choice, but I can lay out some potential options. I think it's up to the African-American community who's been persecuted for years and years, hundreds of centuries, to ultimately make this decision and what's best for them. But what Kyrie Irving has done here, whatever his intentions may be, is he's now put some pressure on the owners. Because like Xavier said, you didn't hear anything about the owners. You know, they may have ran a Black Lives Matter promo or a patch on a jersey or maybe a little commercial time. We're talking real hard-nosed change. And you can't expect the owners to necessarily eradicate racism. Again, that's probably not possible, at least tomorrow or the week after. But what they can do and what the players can really do, which would be very important, is get some demands. Get some demands in place. What do you want for sitting out? What do you need from the owners? One thing I've heard from multiple sources is now make the owners give back to the African-American communities. Start building programs. Start building youth centers. Start building schools. Start building Black-owned businesses. Give back to these so there can be real change. And while it may not eliminate racism and xenophobia and all of just multiple types of negativity, what it could do is make lives better for people who are in a system that essentially has them doomed to fail. I mean, the system is clearly tilted to help out white people. That's just the way it's been. It's the way it's always been. So if you can get some more money into the African-American communities, it will allow more freedom, a happier life, and allow for more social change. But now this is where the debate does get interesting, and I couldn't pick a side. Again, it's not for me to decide. You're looking at, by the players playing, they're going to make a heck ton of money, and obviously 80% of the NBA is African-American. So they're going to make a heck ton of money, and this money, if they decide to give back, could go directly to the African-American community. As Xavier touched on, obviously the stars are in a different situation than a role player or a guy in a minimum salary. So that is really important to include as well. But the players don't have the type of money that owners have. And this is where this movement by Avery Bradley, Dwight Howard, like Xavier said, Kevin Durant chimed in a little bit. I feel that's mostly to defend his teammate, because I know that Kendrick Perkins over on ESPN came after Kyrie. So I think Kevin was just being a good teammate, and that's what you're supposed to do on a team. So really, there is no right answer, but change needs to be addressed one way or another, and they're really forcing the issues on the owners. Again, you heard nothing. When the NBA came back, you heard nothing about the Black Lives Matter movement. You heard about whatever. There's a date on August 25th, maybe the draft lottery, the season starting on July 31st. They don't want to interfere with the NFL playoffs, but we heard nothing about Black Lives Matter. And that's what's important here. This is beyond sports. This is transcendent beyond anything athletically inclined. This is people searching for freedom, and everyone deserves freedom. You can call it what you want, but this is freedom. As a white male, I can go on the street and feel pretty comfortable that a cop's not going to essentially put my life at risk for something that's so minor, such as a $20 bill, or most times even nothing, like just walking down the street in a hoodie or looking at a construction site. So there needs to be change. There needs to be equality, and most importantly, African Americans in all cultures, because there's Latino communities as well. Right now, we're in the current movement of African Americans. This is a great starting point. But all people of multiple minorities who the system is not protecting. And I think however that change needs to be addressed, it needs to be taken care of. And I think it's really cool that Kyrie Irving, Avery Bradley, and Dwight Howard, at the minimum, are forcing the owners to make some sort of adjustment, or at least make them uncomfortable, and hopefully open up their checkbook for the African American community.
All right,
after that, I'll kick it over to you, Scott.
Okay.
Well, Scott, before you chime in, I'd like to just add in one thing to what Nick said yesterday, and it's to the Dwight Howard factor in all of this, and I feel it's very important for where we are in this conversation right now. Yesterday in Atlanta, there was a press conference held that was going to determine the charges that the former police officer who fatally shot Rayshard Brooks, the unarmed black man who was killed in Atlanta on last Friday in a Wendy's parking lot after running away from police and attempting to use a taser on them. They issued his charges yesterday, the Fulton County District Attorney. That officer has been charged with murder, and the death penalty is available, and that former officer has now turned himself in. The second officer who was involved, there's a bond being offered for him. He's not being charged with murder, and he is currently on leave. So he has not been terminated from the force just yet. And I bring that point up because Dwight Howard was in the courtroom yesterday in Atlanta when this came down, because the Fulton County District Attorney, Paul Howard, also just so happens to be his uncle. So I feel like that's very important for us to bring into play here to really show where Dwight Howard is really standing with this movement and his stance on all of this. Scott, your thoughts?
All right, well, let me go ahead and talk about Kyrie Irving, because this one's been brewing in my mind, and if I crash this comment, I apologize for nothing on that. I like to use interesting, eventful analogies, and that's why we're having a little bit of fun with that. All things considering, okay, as far as Kyrie Irving is concerned, you're talking about a man that wanted to be traded out of Cleveland, okay, and he went to Boston. And of all places you're going to go to, the Boston area is known for being a racist area. You know, think about the history over there, right? Boston racist. You know, there's been a history with the Red Sox, so they haven't treated their minority athletes too favorable. So, but to me, Kyrie Irving, okay, got a championship because he was with LeBron. Did he think he was going to do a lot better without him? Obviously, he didn't. And to me, he's been all lip service. I'm not saying that what he's saying on this situation doesn't matter. I think it's fine and dandy. But I don't view Kyrie Irving as a source that I want to feel reliable internally. You guys understand where I'm coming from? Okay.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, Cleveland wasn't good enough for him. I can do it by myself, and he didn't last in Boston long. And guess what? I'm with the Nets out in Brooklyn, and when you look about the fact that, for me, Kyrie Irving has been nothing more than injury prone. He was injury prone at Duke, okay, and then, of course, you know, think about his injury history. And again, he wouldn't have won that championship without LeBron. I mean, to me, he's a complimentary piece is all he was, like Scottie Pippen was to Michael Jordan. So I'm not going to knock what his attempted, but I'll go back to what Nick said, okay? Kyrie Irving, okay, was okay with it a couple weeks ago, but now that is he able to participate in this, then he's going to spout off these comments and create a little bit of unrest within the NBA restart program. Sorry, guys, Kyrie Irving doesn't earn a whole lot of credibility in my mind. As for Dwight Howard, interesting to note that he was in the Atlanta courtroom. But let's talk about credibility for his NBA career, guys. Dwight Howard has bounced around the NBA quite a bit, right? Think about his stops, quite a few of them. You know, I don't have to tell you that he's been a journeyman. This is his second stint with the Lakers, okay? And go ahead, Xavier. How many other places has Dwight Howard been? Name a few of the cities that he's played in.
I'll go ahead and I'll run down the entire list really quickly.
Please
His career
do.
began in Orlando. Then he was traded to the Lakers, left the Lakers, and he signed with Houston. Houston cut him, and he signed with Atlanta, who then traded him to Charlotte. He was then traded to Washington, who then traded him to Memphis, who did not want him. He was cut, and he signed with the Lakers on a veteran minimum deal.
Well, I'd say he's got a few frequent flyer miles with his stops, right, guys? Okay, so to me, while Dwight Howard is what he's doing is admirable and fine, a lot of teams don't even want the guy. He really is. He's not a starter on that Lakers team, is he? No, he's a complimentary piece. So when we talk about the individuals for whom we're talking about, Kevin Durant hasn't played all year, right? But let's just let Kevin Durant do a lot more talking than his basketball play has done. He's been what I consider a malcontent as well. Avery Bradley, all right, so has he been a journeyman lately? Again, I'm not downplaying what they're trying to do, but LeBron James, are they all really ready? Sounds like you got two guys that aren't really fully all the way invested into this whole thing. So let's go ahead and put in perspective about the individuals that are involved with this NBA restart. Do you really, from an overall standpoint, view that Avery Bradley, Dwight Howard, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving can maintain the full credibility? I was impressed a lot with Kendrick Perkins when he was on Golic and Wingo. Golic and Wingo had a lot of questions, but good old Kendrick Perkins went out there and answered all my questions in all of 5 to 7 to 8 minutes, and these guys didn't need him anymore because he said it in few words, and he sounded pretty credible to me. So tell me, Nick and Xavier, okay, do you consider these four individuals as completely reliable sources of information? I'm kind of wondering, because I don't think that they overall, for the most part, I understand what they're standing for, but I'm not buying all of these guys. Sorry, guys, but I'm not. Go ahead.
The guy who I'm buying right now as the most reliable of all this is Avery Bradley, and that's simply because Avery Bradley doesn't have a history of coming out here and saying controversial, off-the-wall statements. I believe all of their hearts are in the right place with this, and it is an interesting point that Kyrie Irving is now coming out and speaking about this, but it has to be noted that there were a group of players who asked Kyrie to come out and speak on this because they went to the Players Association's president, Chris Paul, and they felt that their voices were not being heard from Chris Paul. So they went to the man who they voted as the vice president of the Players Association, being Kyrie Irving, to have their voices heard on this. Now, do I know where his stance on all of this was weeks ago? No, I don't know, and I'm not here to question that. And I'm not here to question where anybody's heart is on any of these matters. But I understand what you're saying here, Scott, with the four guys here who have come out and are now being viewed as the leaders of this players' coalition. What I would like to see is, I would like to see who are some of the other players who are involved in this. Because, as I said, we heard that there were 150 to 200 players who were on that call last Friday. And I want to know who some of those other players were, because that's more than half of the league there that's on that call, or it's like they're at half of the league who was on that call. But I'm standing with them 100% on this entire thing, just simply what they are standing for. I mean, it's police brutality and also the coronavirus, because I have been a huge proponent of the league and leagues in general not coming back simply, and this was before all of the uprising and the police brutality for 2020 had even happened, because I work in the media, I work at a news station, I'm very familiar with how serious all of this is right now in the midst of the pandemic. And like I said, Florida had a rise in cases overnight by over 3,200 cases. And that's very concerning, even though that's not equivalent to the number of people who are unfortunately passing away to this, which is far lower than that. But the fact that the numbers are rising at the rate that they are is alarming and concerning. And it should be noted that the NBA is not the only league that is set to come back in the state of Florida. As a matter of fact, the WNBA is in the final planning stages of coming back to play at the IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, which is about 15 minutes away from where I actually live. So, I mean, the NBA is not the only sport. that is getting ready to make its comeback here in the state of Florida. We heard months ago, Scott, you and I in particular, Governor Ron DeSantis, he said that he would welcome sports coming back in Florida. He wanted Florida to be the state where sports would be open to coming back and restarting and to start with this economic reboot and the jump for the economy. He came out and he said that months ago. And once again, I understand that, and I understand that there's money that needs to be made here, but we need to take life and everything else with health first and foremost right now. And I'm not exactly sure that even if you put them in a bubble, that you can contain that. And as far as the fight against racism and police brutality goes, I'm standing with them on this as well. Now, Kevin Durant did say something in the past 36 hours that I do not agree with him saying. He called Kendrick Perkins a sellout. And that is the last person who needs to call anybody a sellout, especially with him jumping from Oklahoma City to Golden State, because that was the ultimate sellout move right there. He sold out Oklahoma City because he felt that he'd have a better chance to win more championships going to the Golden State Warriors. And he ultimately did win more championships going to Golden State, even though he didn't get the individual cachet that he thought he was going to get based off of that. So I don't agree with him calling Kendrick Perkins a sellout, and I don't agree with him being the person who would use the term sellout to describe anybody. I'm not in line with him there.
Well, I agree with you there, Xavier. Kevin Durant should be the last person calling anybody a sellout. All right, Nick, weigh in on this.
So I'm going to hop with both your points here. I'm going to go back to what Scott asked about the four players' credibility, and then back to Xavier and the Kevin Durant individually. So the four players and their credibility, the only player, or excuse me, three players, the only player I really question is Kyrie. Again, the timing of Kyrie saying this after he realized he couldn't be a part of the season, that just seems fishy. But there are sources, mainly Stephen A. Jackson, who's been saying that Kyrie's very involved in this, that Kyrie's basically called him crying. And then again, on the other side, you have Kendrick Perkins saying that Kyrie is doing this for other reasons. So I couldn't tell you, again, what his priority is. With Avery Bradley and Dwight Howard, I fully support. Again, I think they're standing behind the Black Lives Matter movement and doing it from the bottom of their heart. I truly believe that with those two. With Kyrie, I don't know. I can't make an assumption one way or another. And also, just hopping back to the basketball element, we'll step back into race relations here in a second. But in the basketball element, I completely agree with you, Scott, and it sounds like Xavier's on the same page as well. No, Kyrie was never that guy. To leave Cleveland, and granted it is Cleveland, my dad's from Cleveland, so I can make fun of that city all I want. But to leave Cleveland for Boston, it makes no sense. You with LeBron James, you just won a championship and probably had more championships lined up. When you're playing with the king, that comes with the territory. And like Scott said, I think that on a championship caliber team, I completely agree. Kyrie is an amazing complementary piece. Amazing. I mean, the guy can score. His dribbles, his ball movement, his crossover. There's no one in the league who can quite make shots like Kyrie, and that is unmatched. But you're looking at a team leader, and I think Scott knows this as Xavier. As a youth basketball coach, I coach a couple teams out here in Seattle. He plays terrible basketball in terms of there's a time for isolation ball. Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. If you have the ability like a James Harden or Kyrie, use it, but be smart when to use it. Don't just do 10 dribbles to force up a contested three-pointer. Even if you make that shot, your teammates are now bored. They don't want to play defense. They're standing around. The offense is out of rhythm, and you're holding the team in its entirety. Even if you're scoring 40, 50 points and winning a game, because he doesn't have the talent to do that, and to take away his undeniable talent would be a lie. The man is seriously probably the best scoring point guard in the NBA. Maybe you have a young newcomer here in John Morant, obviously a Russell Westbrook, but Kyrie's up there. Very different, more shifty and quick, but the pure scoring ability is unmatched. But that means nothing come playoff time when you need a team to win. You need a team. It's not just one guy. Michael did need Scottie and Dennis Rodman. LeBron did need Dwayne Wade. Kevin Durant, whether how you're feeling it, clearly needed Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson. So it's ultimately going to take a team to win. And just from a pure basketball standpoint, one-on-one, Kyrie, amazing player, hands down. Is that going to win team basketball? Probably not. So that's something he needs to develop in his game. when we're talking about a Avery Bradley or Dwight Howard, I can compare them even though they play different positions. You're looking at defensive specialists here. Now, Dwight Howard, when he was young, that was a bad man, taking a team to the NBA Finals himself. I mean, he was truly unstoppable as a young blood. I mean, his athleticism, his drive, his defense, just everything. His heart even. His heart was in it a little bit more back then. But now it's just not quite the same. He's just a defensive specialist, and that's all Avery Bradley's ever been. There's nothing wrong with that. They're actually perfect pieces to the Lakers, and I think they really, really, that team will win a title if the NBA decides to come back. But that's something we may hop into a little bit later here or for a whole other day.
Well, so, no, we're covering everything today, guys. So I'm sorry to interrupt, Nick. Let me point something out to you that I think that just entered my mind, okay? There's nothing wrong with being a complimentary piece, okay? Just because you have your first superstar, then you got a complimentary point guard. You know what? When you got 2 or 3 strong players and a fine bench, there's nothing wrong with that. Take your ego and check it at the door, Tyree. That's what I think, okay? Because there were opportunities to win multiple championships, and when you have a guy like LeBron James, I'm tired of all this prima donna stuff. Sorry, folks, but one thing I don't like about the NBA, which is why I don't cover it as much as I used to, because remember, I should tell you this, Nick, I covered the Pistons during the bad boy era. Xavier will tell you that, okay? And to me, the NBA to me is a national drama league, the NDL. So when you want to broadcast, okay, Nick, you can say NDL and you can tell them where you got it from, the Motor City Madmouth here on the Sports Exchange. National Drama League. All this fraternizing with each other. The only guy that carried his team on his back was, let's go back to 1979 when a guy by the name of Larry Bird took the Indiana Sycamores all the way to the finals against Magic Johnson. And, of course, I remember Danny Manning when he took the Kansas Jayhawks, and they won a championship when Larry Brown coached. But how many people can actually do it by themselves? I named you 2 good examples, okay? But that's just a point where there's no wrong with being a second or third guy. It's all about winning, and I think that's what a lot of people tend to forget. You know, nowadays everybody likes to pick their own all-star teams because you can't do it by yourself. Come on, Kevin Durant. You're the biggest darn cop-out on the planet. I think you could have done well over with Oklahoma City, but you just had to get that cheap championship ring. That's what I've got to say. And, of course, all these guys that teamed up in Miami, same thing. But at least LeBron James validated himself when he went back to Cleveland. I'm going to throw a hypothetical question at both of you, okay? You ready? Nick, you're going to answer it first, okay? With LeBron James, okay, do you think that he validated his legacy winning 1 in Cleveland or 2 in Miami?
I think he validated his legacy the second he stepped into the NBA. But if you want to be specific out of those 2, it definitely is the ring in Cleveland. But really quickly, I do want to hop back to the Kevin Durant thing.
Okay.
I think that from a basketball standpoint, yes, you know, he may have gotten that cheap ring. I think we can all agree on that. It made the NBA a lot less fun to watch. But from a racial standpoint and for what's best for his family, I completely understand why an African-American male would want to live in the Bay versus Oklahoma. I think that point stands for itself. And there's police brutality everywhere, but it's probably more prevalent in other areas. And that's all I'll say on the issue. But I would find it, again, it's coming from a white man's perspective, that the Bay, San Francisco, Oakland is probably a lot friendlier environment than Oklahoma City.
All right, but let me also preface another point. The reason why I think that championship for LeBron means more in Cleveland. You ever heard of that 50-some-year championship drought that he snapped? Think about it, okay? The last time they saw a championship, they only had the Indians who were led by Bob Feller, and let alone the fact that not only you've got the Cleveland Browns back in the glory days when Jim Brown was there. So I think LeBron James did more for his legacy, right, Xavier, in Cleveland than he did with the 2 in Miami. And I'm not trying to get off subject, but when we talk about legacies and these kinds of things, these are questions that tend to pop up. So trying to stay on course here. I'm glad that we're able to get a lot into this broadcast, and we're going to touch every single point in this broadcast. I guarantee it. All right, Xavier, continue on. What are your thoughts about what I said, and what else do you want to add to it?
Well, I definitely agree that LeBron James validated his basketball legacy when he went back to Cleveland and he delivered that championship after a 52-year sports drought there. And I also agree that Kyrie Irving, as a basketball player, will never be on the status of LeBron James. I believe Kyrie Irving deep down inside knows that, even though it may pain him on the inside. I believe he knows that as well. But I do have some questions for LeBron James right now as far as his stance on all of these other things going on outside of basketball right now. And this is where I bring up the LeBron James factor in this Kyrie Irving Players Coalition versus the NBA thing that's going on right now. I bring this up because Kendrick Perkins said something yesterday to me that was really out of bounds for him to say. Him saying that Kyrie Irving and the Players Coalition movement was a distraction away from the young girl, I believe 18 years old, who was murdered in Akron, Ohio, or near the Akron, Ohio area just 4 days ago. Here's my question about Kendrick Perkins, since he wants to go there with that, and that's really out of bounds for him to go there with that. To me, here's my question to him, and I would like you guys to respond to this as well. Why didn't we hear about LeBron James talk about that one as well? He was out here on the front lines talking for George Floyd. He was out here on the front lines talking for Ahmaud Arbery. Why was he not talking about something that also happened in or near his hometown where he was born and bred, where he grew up from? And I didn't hear anything from him in particular till last night. And I'm not here to question a man's heart or where he stands on any of these issues right now, because LeBron James has done many great things for the black community, for minority communities, for giving back to Akron, Ohio, giving back to many other communities, building a school in his hometown for children to go to and to give them a place to go after school to help keep them out of trouble and to keep their minds focused on moving in the right direction. He's done many great things, but on this stance right here, he has not done everything 100% correctly. It should be noted. And the reason that I brought up what I said earlier about that tweet that he said back in late April, early May, about his team being ready to go, and two players on his team in particular, like, no, we are not in favor of returning right now. Kyrie Irving actually invited LeBron James to be a part of that call last Friday to hear what those other players on that call had to say. LeBron James did not go and be a part of that call. He had an opportunity to be a part of it there. So why did you deny going to be a part of that call, LeBron James? That's my question to him. Why did you deny going to be a part of that call and deny hearing what those players have to say? Whether you agree with it or you don't, that's one thing or another. But you not at least being man enough to stand up and go take the call, that's an issue and another one itself right there. And I wanted to hear from them. I didn't know anything about the murder that took place in Akron, Ohio with the young black girl until Kendrick Perkins brought that up yesterday. And by that being LeBron James' hometown, he should have spoken up about that, because his friends, Rich Paul, Maverick Carter, they brought this to the forefront yesterday. LeBron posted something about it on his Instagram story last night, but he hasn't been as open about it as he's been with other police brutality and racial injustice and racism situations. I'm not here to compare racism situations. What I'm here to say is this. Don't stand here and be a social justice, Muhammad Ali type warrior when it only benefits you. If you're going to stand on the front lines for this thing, you need to stand on it on all times. Don't do it when it just benefits you. Because right now it feels like he's doing this when it only benefits him. I'm not saying he's not in favor of the movement. Yes, LeBron James will use the NBA platform if and shall it return this year as a place where he will continue to promote Black Lives, the Black Lives Matter movement, and he will continue to wear the I Can't Breathe shirts, and he'll use the platform for that. But is it more important right now for you to go back and win a championship, win another ring, as opposed to standing up for what's right now in the face of racial injustice and also in the face of a pandemic? So I'm not here to question completely where a man's heart is on this, but I will question, how bad do you really want these changes to happen? Do you want to be a Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell type figure for all of this at all times, or do you only want to do it when it benefits you?
All right.
You guys take the floor.
All right, let me point something out that I want to make sure I get out there. First of all, I understand the Akron, Ohio thing, but let's not lose sight of one thing that I want to make sure we bring to the forefront. For all I know, LeBron James may have a grudge against Kyrie Irving, and that's just a gut feeling. I mean, players do hold grudges against other guys for a long time, so maybe he just didn't want nothing to do with Kyrie Irving, so you got to think about that too. It's not like that relationship ended on favorable terms. LeBron James definitely should champion the movement, but I suppose he'll do it in his own way. and again, when we talk about Muhammad Ali, though, we're talking about it in a totally different way. So, I know how a lot of players are. Some of them hold deep grudges. What happened in his hometown of Akron, I get that, But you talk about when you talk about the sum of the whole or the whole of the sum, that's something that I have to kind of look into. Who knows how often that those two have spoken in a while. Do you know what I mean? So I think you have to look at that as well. Nick, what are your thoughts about that? LeBron James versus Kyrie Irving.
I think that's a really good point to bring up, honestly. I mean, Kyrie essentially, there's many ways you can phrase it, but Kyrie essentially divorced LeBron after they won a championship.
Good point.
And so it just very interesting where maybe LeBron does hold that. And one thing I've always felt about LeBron, this doesn't make him a bad person or right or wrong. And again, rest in peace, Kobe. This is where the comparison always comes in. Jumping back to LeBron, LeBron has always felt like a guy who wanted to be liked. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people, like Xavier was saying, like Bill Russell or Muhammad Ali, may stand 100% for social change. And regardless of who cares what, this is their belief system. With LeBron, it's always felt to me like he just really needs that love, that attention. It's like you look at a Kobe, man. Kobe was out there, say you're having a couple beers or something with your buddy at the bar. LeBron might be hanging out, chilling, just cracking jokes, having a great time. Kobe's the type of guy's like, let's leave this and let's go shoot jumpers. I'm going to beat you. I'm going to beat you. Whereas LeBron is more, hey, man, let's just have a good time. Let's just hang out. So with his personality type and Kyrie leaving him, I think he probably took that personally. I completely agree with you, Scott. I think that there's just something about him needing to be liked where other players, again, like a Kobe or a Michael, oh, Kyrie leaving, okay, I'll go get more championships. Doesn't matter. LeBron probably didn't feel that way. It's like, oh, you want to leave the king? And hopping back to what Xavier said, he posted something with his king symbol, kind of insinuating that he is the voice for the league. Granted, he would never outright say it because that sounds cocky, especially coming from a guy who wants to be liked. But there's something a little bit interesting about his personality trait. Again, nothing wrong with it, but it is something I've noticed with him throughout the years. And even going back to him, like with that first loss to the Mavericks in the finals, whatever year it was, I'm not sure exactly what year it was, his first year down in Miami. Right. When they lost to the Mavericks, he had that whole spiel of, well, you all can go back to your everyday lives. For someone who doesn't care about what other people think, and I'm sure he's grown from that moment, I never judge someone off of one incident, but that's just something that shows people's opinions did bother him. He felt that pressure, and it seems like he's always felt that way. And so to do a little cross-section here with Xavier's point, why has he not spoken up about the Akron murder in specific? I couldn't answer that. Again, I'm not LeBron, but a player of his caliber does hold more of an owner-type role than another player, and he may have a cease order from ownership. And again, this is where he has to figure out what's right for him. Well, and I'll hand it over to Scott or Xavier.
Let's not lose sight of one thing,
Scott,
okay?
Scott, let me take it just a little from here just to clean up something that I did say here just a little earlier.
Sure.
LeBron James did tweet about the murder of Nakia Crawford, the 18-year-old who was killed in Akron, Ohio, a few days ago. He did speak about it on Twitter 2 days ago. He spoke about it last night on Instagram Live, and he's been speaking more out about it today on his Twitter platform. So if it came across that I was saying that LeBron James didn't speak out about it at all, I apologize for that because he is speaking a little about it. However, I will continue to say this point here. He's not being as loud and boisterous about this as he has about some of the other recent police brutality incidents that have taken place. And for this one to have taken place in his hometown and for him to not be as loud about it, I'm just a little sketchy on that one. Scott, take it away.
Okay, well, that's no big deal. Again, we're having a three-way conversation with various viewpoints. Let's not lose sight of that his PR hasn't been the greatest. Now, I got to say one thing about LeBron. You know what he has in common with me?
What?
We're both Capricorns.
What would that be?
We're Capricorns. How about that? we have to work hard for our birthdays. We got to wait 363, 364, 5 days a year to get our birthdays. We work really hard to get them. So LeBron, from one Capricorn to another, no problem. Now, let's talk about his PR a little bit. We're talking about a man that when he left Cleveland the first time to go to Miami, that thing called the decision wasn't probably the smartest thing to do. And then that complicate the problem or compound it. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 champions. He had a marked man, a bullseye on his chest. When he left, when he went to go back, then he didn't mind doing it on the Players Tribune. So it was a PR mess. Some of his PR moves, I think, are very sketchy, through over time. So, but, all in all, he's certainly one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And he's had to do a lot more with nothing than most players, which explains why he's 3-6 in the finals. But he's had he's done a lot to carry a team, and he can take it over. So there's a lot of different ways to go with LeBron. I'm a firm believer, and I learned this as a lesson growing up. There's a time and a place. I have that. You, Nick, you have it. Xavier, you have it. Okay. There's a time and a place when you're going to make a comment and express your viewpoint. And you know what? If he has to step back, kind of would take a wait and see attitude about where it's all going, that's another animal altogether. You follow me? So I'm not going to get critical about James about timing that he said. That doesn't matter. When he feels it's time to mention something, he will. But we can't force a man to state an opinion until the time is right. Don't you guys agree that the timing has to be right for anybody to speak out? Accumulating more facts, ideas. And what compounds the problem is we're not helping it any. Social media and the media about adding more and more to it. So you just have to add it all up and find out what you've got. There's a lot of, there's an 8-layer cake, and we're probably going to have an 88-layer cake when this broadcast is all said and done. But at least we're trying to not ignore the key point. So you guys tell me when you want to talk about basketball, we can do it, although it's important to address this matter as well because it's one that's certainly not going to go away anytime soon because, unfortunately, we're going to hear more police brutality problems that have gone deeper than the Minneapolis one. I hear there was an incident in Las Vegas where I believe a guy got shot and he's paralyzed neck down. I don't know if you guys heard about that one recently. So it's not going away with both sides. It only figures to get more and more difficult as time goes on. You guys want to keep this part going, or you want to talk some basketball? You let me know what you want to do.
Well, I want to segue into the next conversation. I simply want to close this out. And, Nick, if you have any closing thoughts, please chime in on this as well. Scott, you're 100% right. I didn't hear about the incident that took place in Las Vegas, but we all saw the incident that took place in Atlanta last Friday. There were 2 men who were hanging from trees in California over the past weekend. There was a young girl who was found dead in Florida over the past weekend who was out protesting with the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, she had spoken out about recently being sexually assaulted, and they found her hanging dead. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with police brutality, but also there was a young man who was found hanging in Texas today or a few days ago as well. So, Scott, as you said, this is something that's not going to go away overnight, and the fight for change must continue to happen, and I will continue to do my part in this fight as well. And, Scott, I told you this last Friday because I know where you stand on this as well. Nick, I know where you stand on this, too, just through this conversation that we're having right now. I'd like to thank both of you for standing in solidarity for us right now, not just for standing with me and my fellow black brothers and sisters, but just simply for taking a stand for what's right.
Well, let's talk about Oklahoma City for a minute. The Detroit Pistons hired a general manager from Oklahoma City, African-American. The guy was the architect. I don't know what the guy's name is off the top of my head, but I'm sure you and I or somebody will research it, who the new Detroit Pistons. And he drafted Russell Westbrook is what he did. So the Pistons made a good minority hire, a guy that'll work alongside of Ed Stefanski. If any guys want to get the name, I think it's that, I don't know, I'm sure the name will come up with us. But, again, the NBA continues to have a lot more. Who? Troy Weaver just got hired by the Detroit Pistons today to lead the Pistons into the rebuilding. So you want to talk about whether Oklahoma City, he's made a lot out of nothing in that small market, and they've done well. So you want to talk about that hiring before we go on to the playoffs? Who wants
Yes, for sure. I believe that he is going to help lead the Pistons back in the right direction. Very similar to where I believe the Atlanta Hawks general manager is trying to take that team. Remember, that general manager, I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now, but he came from that Golden State Warriors organization. He was there when they drafted at least Clay and Draymond and Harrison Barnes, even though Harrison Barnes isn't there anymore. I don't believe he was there when Steph Curry was drafted, but he was there for the heart of the dynasty when they were building things up under Mark Jackson and when Steve Kerr came in and helped take that offense to another level, and we saw the Golden State Warriors become a dynasty. He was there for that, and I see the way that he's building this Atlanta team right now going in a similar direction. Oklahoma City has not won any championships, but they have had a great deal of success in the Western Conference since 2010. They've only missed the playoffs once since 2010. Now, they first moved to Oklahoma City during the 2008-2009 season. That was the only awful year that they had there, and that's when those young players, a young Kevin Durant, a young Russell Westbrook, and a young James Harden were all coming up there. They put it all together the very next year. That team has made 4 Western Conference Finals. As I said, they only missed the playoffs once during the previous decade, and that was because Kevin Durant missed most of that season with foot injuries, and Russell Westbrook was really a one-man show out there, and he couldn't really do much with it. But that team had a lot of success in a very crowded Western Conference where it's very easy to miss the playoffs. I mean, guys, we saw the Phoenix Suns one year win 48 games and end up missing out on the NBA playoffs because they play in the West. Had they played in the East, they would have been a top 5 seed that year. So they've done a great job of that organization and everything they've been able to do there. And I believe this is going to be a total breath of new fresh air for the Detroit Pistons organization. And it's a brand new day, and Piston fans should be excited.
Yeah, it appears to be a pretty good hire. I think, the Oklahoma City's definitely been a breath of fresh air, a small market doing well. And I think they made it to the NBA Finals. Did they make it to the NBA Finals, I think, once? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, they made it in the 2011-2012 lockout shortened season.
And by the way, Nick, I know you're a Seattle guy, okay? I'm pulling for the Sonics to get an NBA team because I know they're going to name them the Supersonics. I know they get to keep the name when they do it. So we're pulling for you out there, Nick, so you have some professional basketball to work with. You want to chime in on this Pistons hiring before we get to the playoffs?
Yeah, no, thank you. Tugging at my heartstrings here. So,
what do you want me to do? I'm going to tell you what, okay, before I tug at him more, when I was doing some play-by-play at home, I remember those great Sonics teams when they played against the Washington Bullets, and then they came back to win it there, and I was doing play-by-play back in the day in front of my television set with Jack Sikma, Marvin Webster, Downtown, Freddie Brown, okay, as Brent Musburger would say, okay, and I enjoyed watching those games, albeit I think many of them were on tape delay, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously being from Seattle, having my team taken away was not my favorite thing in the world to happen, saying that nicely, but I can put that aside, talk to strictly basketball here. So you're looking at it from the Pistons standpoint, and you have to base it off Weaver's success with the Thunder. And yeah, they were an amazing franchise. And if Kevin Durant decides to stay, they probably win the NBA Finals. If we're going back to that season in itself, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I believe the Thunder or the Warriors were up 3-1, and Draymond got away with like a terrible flagrant foul. There were some really weird official non-calls and calls that essentially allowed the Golden State Warriors to win the Western Conference and eventually the Cavs. I forget who actually won that year. So off the top of my head, that's just slipping right now. But you're looking at the Thunder's entire body of work, as I just mentioned, basically a pull of a hair away from an NBA Finals, and consistently they've been dominant. I mean, you had Russell Westbrook, you had Kevin Durant, and obviously those are the big names, but what really shows a good general manager like Weaver is you're looking at names that really fill out a roster in a Serge Ibaka, in a Steven Adams. I think Steven Adams is such an amazing find. You find a 7-foot rugby player from, I believe, New Zealand to come play basketball, and he's a stud. He's a lockdown post down low. So when you're finding obscure talent like that, or even this year, a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you're finding talent in places that other cities may overlook because obviously OKC is a small market. but Weaver's doing an amazing job finding them. And if you're looking at this year in particular, off the top of my head, I believe the Thunder right now are in 5th place in the Western Conference. Maybe off a spot, they may be 6th, but they're in that 5th or 6th range right now. I believe it's 5th. And how? How? They had no one on their team this year. I mean, yes, they had Chris Paul, but he was old. He was washed up, right? I guess not. They're looking really good. And somehow with a team like Chris Paul, Steven Adams, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you don't have an amazing talent-filled team, to be quite frank. And yet, they're sitting in 5th place in the Western Conference. And this goes back to hiring of Billy Donovan, hiring great coaches, finding great players, and all around, he's been a very solid general manager for the Thunder, and I can't see him not doing phenomenal things for the Pistons as well.
Not only, that's true. I'm glad the Pistons made the hire. I think it's a quality hire. I think they're in the right direction. But Billy Donovan was a great hire for the Thunder. I mean, geez, all he did was win championships with the Florida Gators, right? Okay, so I think he did pretty good. All right, just thought I'd throw that in there. So, all right, let's talk about those things called the NBA playoffs and the play-in. I know that's one of our primary focuses on tonight. I'm glad we addressed the other issues because I think with this being an NBA show, and I haven't had a full NBA show in quite a while, but I'm glad I have the two of you guys alongside of me tonight. So it deserves a lot more time, and I'm glad we're touching everything. So, all right, let's talk about the NBA playoffs. Who wants to lead off between the two of you?
I'll go ahead and I'll take it from here because I'm really excited about the potential of the NBA coming back because us as broadcasters, as analysts, and just as content guys, we do need sports coming back. I like the format that they've come up with, but I just don't understand why the Phoenix Suns have to be included in this, to be quite honest with you. That is one of my gripes with all of this because they will not be making the playoffs. You can try to drum this up any way you want to. The Phoenix Suns will not automatically slide from that 13th spot all the way to that 8th spot. They are not better than the Memphis Grizzlies. They are not better than the New Orleans Pelicans. When healthy, they are not better than the Portland Trail Blazers. I'm not so sure they're better than the Sacramento Kings or the San Antonio Spurs either. They're a young, developing team that, Monty Williams is leading back in the right direction. I believe they are about a year away from legitimately contending for a 7th or 8th spot in the Western Conference, but this is not their year. That's really my only gripe with that so far. I'm not looking forward to seeing the Phoenix Suns in this, but I am looking forward to the playoff bubble. And more than anything, I'm hoping and praying that everybody is able to stay healthy during this time.
Go on, Nick.
Yeah, so I mean, you're looking at the NBA coming back, and whether it's the right or wrong decision, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about pure basketball, and this is the most exciting year there's been in the NBA in a long time. We're just going to look at the top teams here right now. I think you're looking at a Giannis and the Bucks. They've been putting up a historical season. We're on pace for 70 wins, but there's no guarantee that they're going to win the playoffs, and that's what's making this year so exciting. Yes, Giannis is amazing, but Eric Bledsoe and Chris Middleton, does that sound like a real solid two to you? I mean, Chris Middleton is a knockdown shooter. I love shooters, man. The guy can shoot. Eric Bledsoe's a scorer, kind of like a poor man's Kyrie. He can really get to the hole, do some things athletically. But that's not a dominant team by any means necessary. And so you're looking at them out in the East. You also now have to fare with the Toronto Raptors. And I do want to include, I believe that Kyle Korver's on the Bucks. He's always a nice little piece to have, just to stress the floor a little bit. But hopping over to the Raptors now, a team that's long been forgotten about. They're supposed to be done. They won their championship. Kawhi's gone. I guess not, because they find themselves in second place right now behind a very, very dangerous front court combination in Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, and Pascal Siakam. That is dangerous. They may not have that elite guard talent per se, but they really have just such a solid front court that they could beat the Bucks. They matched up against them very favorably. So you're looking at that in the East. Obviously, I'm not sure if I just said you got Kyle Lowry leading the point. So you have a pretty solid team. There's two solid matchups right there. You're looking at a third team out East. You got the Celtics. A lot of people are picking them. They're kind of the sexy pick right now. A lot of people excited about Jason Tatum, a Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker combination. We'll see where Kemba's knee's at, coming back off surgery or recovering from an injury. So again, You 3 teams out east who could really compete, and quickly hopping out west. I mean, you got the 2 LA squads. I mean, well, how can you get much better than that? You got LeBron and Anthony Davis. Just think about that. You have LeBron and Anthony Davis. You have Dwight Howard coming off your bench. Granted, we talk about Dwight Howard in a different light, but if Dwight Howard is coming off your bench, you have a solid team. You got an Avery Bradley on that squad, another guy we're talking about, great defensive piece. JaVale McGee, great defensive piece. So the Lakers are very, very solid, and now they're competing against their crosstown rivals in the Clippers. I mean, you got Paul George, you got Kawhi Leonard, and this is just makes for such an interesting dynamic. And one thing I do want to touch on that a lot of other people may not be focusing on with the NBA, I think the Clippers were not going to beat the Lakers at all. I still think the Lakers are most likely going to win the championship if it comes back. But slowing down here for a second, if, say, the whole coronavirus situation never happened and the NBA season was played as normal, the Clippers essentially would have a 7-game road series against the Lakers, because that is the Lakers city. Regardless of, whoever home court it may or may not be, that is the Lakers home court. And now the Clippers don't have to contend with that. They're in this weird neutral bubble type situation where every game is essentially a neutral site, and that really bodes well in their favor. So you're just looking at the West. You got the two LA squads. You're hopping out east. You got the Celtics. You got the Raptors. You got the Bucks. You got a lot of diversification within the league, and this is something we've not seen in past seasons. So from a pure basketball standpoint, I would love to see these guys go at it. This isn't just the Warriors and the Cavs this year. There's a whole cavalry of teams who can get it done.
Well, all I'll say is the Clippers have never made it to the NBA Finals. Until they get there, I'm not taking them seriously. As far as the Milwaukee Bucks, I'll tell you what, Nick, don't sell that team short, because Middleton and Bledsoe are a pretty good tandem. Kyle Korver's not a bad piece. Now, albeit the Bucks haven't been to the Finals since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was there, or Lou Alcindor back in the 70s. And whether or not they can stack up against the Lakers in a 7-game series, I'm not sure. I would probably be on the fence about that because, again, and don't sell the Toronto Raptors short. Now, as far as the Philadelphia 76ers, they haven't proven anything to me. I'm not buying into the 76ers. But I'm not sold on the Clippers at all. I just am not. And I don't know why. For some reason, I'm not sold on them at all. Now, here's another interesting question, though, guys. The San Antonio Spurs have a 23-year playoff streak. Will they make it 24? Because I think, Xavier, you pointed out to me earlier today that, if they don't crack that 16-team the way they normally do, that streak comes to an end.
Yes, it does, and I believe that in this scenario, this will also come to an end. It's been a nice run for Greg Popovich and the Spurs organization with this, but ultimately, when Kawhi Leonard left that organization, or forced his way out, I should say, after the 2017-18 season, where he only played 9 games due to a quote-unquote quad injury that was bothering him for most of the season. That pretty much was the death nail in that coffin as far as that team continuing to be a legitimate championship contender. I believe it was going to come to an end. I don't trust DeMar DeRozan the way that maybe some other people do, just simply because I watched 3 consecutive years of DeMar DeRozan be a victim of LeBronto. That was enough for me right there. LaMarcus Aldridge, he's getting up there in age. I believe he was slowly starting to show his age this year. And you talk about having a fully healthy Portland team that would now have Yusuf Nurkic back healthy. I believe that would be an issue for San Antonio to deal with. I don't believe they would be able to handle that New Orleans Pelicans team that's young and ready to go. And with Memphis having Jaren Jackson Jr. back potentially now after the pandemic has taken place and guys have had a chance to heal from their injuries, I don't believe they would be able to beat them either. So, pandemic or not, I just don't believe the Spurs are going to make the playoffs this year.
All right, let me point something out to you, Xavier. I'm so glad you brought both those situations up in New Orleans. I think, if anything, the benefit of having the Pelicans in there with Zion Williamson will certainly increase ratings And this team was starting to get hot when Zion came back. So I think if it does anything for the brand, it only figures to increase it with Zion Williamson. Can you imagine a matchup with Zion Williamson taking on the Lakers and Lonzo Ball, New Orleans against the Lakers? I think that's something that would be good TV watching. And John Morant with Memphis, they're a good young team too. They're building out there. So I'm glad you brought them up. All right, with that said, Nick, what are your thoughts about the Pelicans and the Memphis Grizzlies?
So I don't know enough about the Grizzlies to really make a realistic opinion here. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. Looking at the Pelicans, for me, I just don't see enough. I think that Lonzo Ball is a very solid piece, and Zion Williamson is obviously taking the league by absolute storm. But if you're looking for a ratings type situation, yes, in a 1 versus 8 seed, assuming they can knock off the Blazers, like Xavier was saying, I think the Blazers are probably the most realistic team to grab that 8 slot. But if you're looking at the Pelicans, they probably don't have enough all around to knock off the Lakers. I mean, who's going to guard Anthony Davis down low? Who's going to guard LeBron? You look at Zion Williamson, again, his first year, and his lateral quickness, even though LeBron slowed down a little bit, I don't think he necessarily has that to hang with LeBron on the perimeter. So who's going to guard him? And again, now you have to figure out the matchup for Anthony Davis. Who else is going to score in the Pelicans? They really don't have a lot of other pieces. So looking at the Pelicans, I just don't see it necessarily. I think that's going to more so go to the Blazers. And again, I don't have enough information on the Grizzlies to really make a proper assumption here. I've heard wonderful things about John Morant, but besides for that, I just don't know too much about their roster in its entirety. So.
Okay, but let me point this out to you, okay? To me, it's not about whether or not the Grizzlies, okay, or the Pelicans advance deep into the playoffs. You're talking about an opportunity to look at 2 future stars that could reshape the league image-wise. That's the only where I'm going with this one, Nick. Okay, Zion Williamson is a building block. Okay, you've got John Morant in Memphis, 2 areas that can definitely use that, where you can build cornerstone franchise around. Anthony Davis wanted to get out, so be it. Goodbye, but they got a decent return for him. So I'm talking about the future is in Memphis and New Orleans, right, Xavier McKnight?
Right, for sure. And just to answer your question there, Scott, because I know where you were going with that just a little. I believe the Pelicans and Lakers will be a very entertaining 5 to 6 game series before the Lakers moved on to the next challenge. But it would be good TV because, I mean, we see that Zion Williamson coming out of Duke was being marketed as the next NBA phenom anyway to become the next potential face of the league. And for him to make the playoffs in his rookie year, especially in a stacked Western Conference, I mean, it would do great for his marketability.
No question about it. No question about it. All right, let's talk about the fact that maybe there may be a little somewhat age discrimination because of COVID-19. We have 3 coaches in their 60s, Greg Popovich, Alvin Gentry, Mark D'Antonio. Will they be allowed to coach? I know Adam Silver tried to backtrack off of it when Rick Carlisle, the president of the Coaches Association, said, not so fast, Adam Silver. Should these 3 coaches be allowed to coach in the bubble?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my opinion, that's ultimately up to them and their own individual preference. Granted, obviously the NBA will be in a heck of a lot of trouble if something happens to these guys, but you're looking at it from, it's free will. I mean, it is their choice, and ultimately if they feel safe. And one thing about this COVID-19, I understand people are dying, and I do not mean to make light of that. That's terrible. That's unfortunate. I really like that word that Xavier used earlier. But it's just one of those very tricky questions right now in society. If you're taking away things that people love, and obviously Greg Popovich loves coaching, Mike D'Antoni loves coaching, Alvin Gentry loves coaching, you're taking away things that people love, is that putting them in almost a worse position? In their particular standpoint, probably not, because they're very set financially. I don't know each of their individual family situations, but with the exception of Greg Popovich's wife passing a couple of years ago, that's obviously a little bit tough, but it's just tough. Do you want these guys to be locked in their house and watching the NBA playoffs? Because that doesn't seem to be healthy to me. But at the same time, exposing them to the risk of COVID-19 and putting the whole NBA in a heck of a lot of hot water if something happens, doesn't seem to be the right decision either. For me, it's their individual choice, and I think if they do choose to coach, they need to sign something that says that the league isn't liable. Granted, the league will probably still be held liable in some sort of way, but I don't think that's necessarily fair. I think, again, they're able to make their own choices. And ultimately, it's how they take care of the body. Yes, age is a very real thing. There's obviously some risk factors for different age groups, people with health concerns. But we don't know if these people take care of their immune system. We don't know about the stress in their life. We don't know the food they eat. We don't know about their relationships. So there's a whole balanced, wide approach picture to take into account here. It's more than just basketball. And we can't get into their literal cells and DNA and figure out what is what. All we can understand is I say I'm healthy. So for me, it's up to each individual. And if they want to coach, go for it. But again, the NBA is going to have to find a way to limit their liability and minimize risk to the best of their abilities.
Well, Nick, good points all along. The bottom line is, under this bubble format, everybody's at risk. Everybody's at risk. Why do you think they only have, 37 people allowed? I think all told, is that the amount in the contingent? I don't know. Plus, family members will come after the first round of the playoffs. So everybody's at risk. Why? But you either have a choice, okay? Are you going to play or not? Are you going to play? So I'm going to ask you guys, Xavier, what do you want to add about the coaches before I get into the asterisk question? You want to chime in on that?
I agree.
Next man?
Well, I agree with Nick just from the standpoint of it should be up to the coaches on whether they coach or not. We understand that they are at the age group, in particular, Greg Popovich, Mike D'Antoni, and Alvin Gentry. They're right there at the age group. And also, it has to be taken into consideration the assistant coaches here as well. Lakers assistant coach Lionel Hollins, he's around that age group too.
Right.
One of the most at-risk ages of really being able to be affected by this COVID-19 virus that's going on right now. And that's one of the main reasons. And Scott, you were already alluding to it there. Everybody's at risk here, and that's one of the main reasons. I'm just one of the proponents of the NBA not necessarily. I'm not going to say not resuming this season, or just postponing it a little longer, because we don't have enough evidence right now that tells us that, okay, they can all come back, they can play, and they'll all be fine. That evidence isn't out there right now. But once again, I understand that this is a business and that money has to be made, and that it would be a huge boost to the economy and also a huge boost to television ratings.
Yeah, but Nick and Xavier, I have a question for you, okay? The Chinese Basketball League tried to go ahead and restart, then they ended up having to stop again. Isn't that a good enough example about what should be done here with the NBA? What happens if people do catch on? The season's done anyways, and I'll get to my point about an asterisk season in a minute, but the Chinese Basketball League, for crying out loud, guys, is pure evidence that you tell me the outcome of that season, Xavier.
Well, yes, I'm with you 100% right there. That should be enough of a cause to pause there to say, okay, maybe we should not bring this back right now. And the Beijing, Scott, as a matter of fact, Beijing is on lockdown as a whole again right now after the recent second wave of coronavirus cases that is now surfacing through the nation of China. And that's something that we have to take into account. And it's something that we could also see happen here in the United States of America as well. We hope that a second wave doesn't happen. But with those numbers that I just read off of you that have taken place in our state, Scott, you and I, and Florida alone just over the past 24 hours,
right?
I don't believe it's very encouraging.
I agree. Nick, what do you have to say about the Chinese situation?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that from the NBA standpoint, they're probably going to do everything they can to come back because of financial obligations. And like Xavier mentioned at the top of the podcast, the NBA is really the league that set the precedent. Once the NBA shut down, we all knew everything was essentially going to be ended. As someone who focuses primarily on the Pac-12 with one of my sites, I knew the Pac-12 tournament was done. So hopping back now to the original point, I just think that is probably the wrong decision. And I just have to use everyday life as an example. I can't go get my hair cut right now without wearing a mask. You're not supposed to be in grocery stores without wearing a mask. You're not supposed to be doing anything. just simple things. My mom is keeping 6 feet of distance from me. We're touching elbows. We're not hugging. If these are the precautions that society and the CDC is recommending, and I give my full trust and support to them, they are the health experts, then how can you realistically expect even 10 guys on a basketball court to play? It makes no logical sense. You have sweat flying around. Guys are close. I mean, it makes no sense that this can really come back with no sort of cases, really emerging, and hopefully not a widespread pandemic within the actual league. I don't think that will happen. I think the NBA is probably smart enough to avoid that. And me and Xavier were talking a little bit earlier, and I think Scott may be listening as well. How can you really ensure that not one single outside person steps into the bubble? You got families. Okay, so you let someone's mom in. Well, how do we know what their mom was doing? Did their mom go out? Did their mom go to church? What if one of these guys has a girlfriend or a significant other? Are they allowed to see them? What if they sneak in or go off-site, off-premise? The fact that you can say that not one case will leak in here seems very troubling to me. And you're looking at it, if even one case sneaks in the league, then you need to quarantine at least 1 or 2 teams, which disrupts the season, which throws everything off. And so I just don't understand how logically this can get done. I was actually answering a question yesterday in regards to college football, and I came back to this exact point. The NBA right now is setting the precedent, and I feel like they're probably pushing it too soon, but I understand it from other people's, mindset. They want to get back to some sense of normalcy with the coronavirus going on, with protests going on around the country. People want some set of normalcy, plain and simple. And so I personally think it's probably not the smartest choice, but I can understand why people would want to see NBA action. But again, I fully think that health and everyone's safety, coaches who may be a little bit older, young players, family members, children throughout the country, throughout the world, safety is the top priority.
Well, let me tell you what, with no disrespect to you, Nick, it's hard for you and your mom to rub elbows. I understand that. Unfortunately, I hate to tell you this, but my mother's dying from COPD. I was supposed to go with my wife over Memorial Day weekend, but because Michigan's a high-risk area, I'm only FaceTiming my mother, and I don't know how many days she's got left. So the COVID-19 has made it impossible to see my own mother. But that's just the way it is. I can't put her at high risk coming from a high state like Florida, right, Xavier? It's pretty hard for us to travel, isn't it? So,
It definitely is. And Scott, I want to bring something to everybody's attention right now, and then I want to hand this off to you because you remember this very well. And I'm really surprised right now that the media outrage is not the same right now necessarily with the COVID-19 pandemic and the potential of players coming back as it was around 1992, 1993. Magic Johnson retired from the Lakers in 91, his first retirement there, because he did have a brief stint back in 96, the 95, 96 season, but that was very regrettable to watch. I mean, we don't really count that, but we know he was diagnosed with HIV. It wasn't AIDS, it was HIV.
Right.
But there was a lot of concern amongst players in the league and also the media as a whole. Okay, after the Dream Team in the 1992 Olympics was over, Magic essentially wanted to actually come back and play in the league. And he actually had played in the preseason and in training camp with the Lakers then. But you had players like Karl Malone who were coming out saying, well, what happens if he sweats on me? What happens if he bleeds on me? And there was an incident where he did suffer a cut, and the trainer, I believe it was Gary Beatty, or maybe it was an assistant trainer, was tending to him, and players started to get really squeamish about the whole thing, and Magic ultimately decided, it's best for me not to come back. It's best for me not to come back. I think this is going to cause a problem. And the media was also in an outrage about that at the time, too. I'm just surprised that the outrage is not as big for this as it was for that.
Excellent point.
What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, excellent point. Yeah, I'm glad you even brought that up. I mean, think about it. HIV at that point, AIDS, were considered a death sentence. Ultimately, he had the medicines and the vaccines, and he was able to beat it. And Irvin's doing real well. But I think it's a great example. What do you think, Nick? Xavier pulled one out of his X-Man hat and came up with the Magic Man, and here we are talking about infectious disease. Give me your thoughts, Nick.
I mean, I think that's just such a different era, especially because you're looking at the stigma of HIV/AIDS in that era. It was considered essentially a disease that affected the LGBTQ community,
right,
as well as a tiny bit of the African American community. So there was a lot of stigma going around, and just the unknown. I mean,
right,
that I think the media was just so focused on. I mean, what do we do? This is the poster boy, and that's the difference here. Is that when you're looking at a COVID-19 type situation, it's everyone. Everyone fears it. Anything can happen at any standpoint. Essentially, every single country in the world has been shut down. When you're talking about HIV, it felt like, okay, the LGBTQ community is affected, but it won't necessarily affect us.
Well, that's true.
So when it happened to Magic Johnson, it just really changed things. And I think the media attention was, I'd say, more outraged because they felt that it was more of a smaller subsection versus this has become our new reality.
Well, that's a good point. I'll give you that. I mean, the bottom line is, though, AIDS was all over the world. It's just nobody knew anything about it. No, don't forget, guys, you didn't have social media either. So, social media has escalated to such a point that, I thought when Johnson got that disease, I thought he was headed for a death sentence. Well, wrong. Okay, that wasn't the case. But don't underestimate, Nick, okay, that AIDS was a worldwide thing. And once it started to hit this country, but thankfully, they were able to get it worked out. This, like you said, this one affects a lot more people, COVID-19. And the saddest part about the whole darn thing is we're going to have a second wave of it. And if you think things are upside down now, they're going to be a lot worse. I hate to sound like these pessimists there, but Xavier McKnight and I are in a state where I think we're already regressing, right, X-Man?
I would definitely agree with that, and I'd like to go back to Nick for a second because
sure.
What I'm talking about in particular with these two instances is the outrage by the media. The media seemed more outraged about Magic Johnson potentially coming back to play in the NBA during that time. And there are clips out there where you had analysts and broadcasters saying they might potentially have to shut down the league for this. Well, it seemed that the media showed more of a concern for that then than what they're necessarily showing for this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I'm not saying that for all of the media, but one of the things that you have heard from many different analysts on many different networks, especially on the sports networks, and why they're pushing for the leagues to come back is because we need content, we need content, we need content. I'm just speaking from an outrage standpoint. It just doesn't seem to me that the sports media in particular has been nearly as outraged about this pandemic that can affect anyone as opposed to how they were about a superstar coming back and playing and how he could have affected players because they didn't know how HIV and AIDS was actually working or how that was transmitted then.
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying that. So to be a little more specific, I think if you're looking at back in that era, essentially, the NBA was still going to happen either way. So the outrage from the media was just like, we can't have this one guy mess it up. Yes, he's a superstar, but there's other superstars in the league. So they knew they were going to get basketball. The world was in a much more stable place. At least it felt that way during that time period. So allowed the media to be a little bit more aggressive, maybe tarnish Magic's name a little bit, and just be all around angry because no matter what happened, they were still going to get basketball. Granted, if Magic came back, now the media's upset because basketball was at risk, and that's a major sport, and people obviously feel very passionate about sports in this country and throughout the world. Whereas if you look at in this day and age, it's not just the NBA. I mean, again, it is the whole world. So the media, they probably don't want to say anything. I mean, basketball coming back is the one thing right now that feels like maybe can bring stability to the country. And whether it's right or wrong, the media doesn't want to step away from that. And if you're looking at it from just a pure bottom line financial standpoint, who knows what they can and cannot say? The NBA and all of its affiliations and corporations and all of that financial big-time word stuff, essentially, we don't know who's interconnected to what, and we don't know what holds the media kind of have placed on them. I know that you were saying you worked for a news station, Xavier, and that was essentially my major in college. I did a lot of news broadcasts as well, and working under these umbrella companies, and there's a lot of big ones. I respect them fully, but there are some limitations on what you can say. So we don't know how restricted they are right now. I mean, are they supposed to focus on the coronavirus, the NBA, the Black Lives Matter movement? To be the news industry is quite interesting at this point. So to quickly summarize, again, in the Magic Johnson era, you're getting basketball either way. The world's in a much more stable place, and people were just outraged because they didn't want this one guy essentially messing it up for everyone, or at least they felt everyone. If you look at today's world, everyone's crazy. You can be a millionaire, you can be a homeless man. Not everyone's crazy. That's not a nice way to phrase that. But everyone's probably in a different mindset than they've been in their entire life. And so the media isn't outraged because even though I agree with both of you, it's probably not a good idea to have the NBA come back. They don't want to be the ones to say it because now you're just dividing the people even further.
Well, I'll tell you this. I was in Phoenix, Arizona at the time, and I was actually winding down my trip, but I had family members that joined us out in the Scottsdale area that wanted to see spring training baseball. They couldn't. I did my 3 games. I was only looking to go to one more. That was the Milwaukee Brewers remodel team. Although we got there before our plane took off, we walked in. There wasn't a big deal. We had already done it a couple of years prior. They just made some renovations. I was in the Phoenix area when the NBA put their season on hold, and at that time I was going to cover another Dodgers game probably later in the week, or at least I thought about it, but you know what, once everything came to a halt, that was all she wrote. So I think one thing you make an interesting point, Nick. The Magic Johnson, Xavier, and Nick, to me, was more of a knee-jerk reaction, I think. Don't you guys think? More of a knee-jerk, where this thing, yeah, you're right, everybody's affected. The death toll and the cases reported have certainly been indicative of that. With that said, guys, you know, do you think that the NBA champion should have an asterisk next to their championship should they pull it off?
I believe it. I believe they definitely will because, I mean, even if you have all the players who come back on all of the teams that qualify play, what type of quality of play are you expecting here? These guys have not been playing basketball for the better part of 3 months now. And if you're expecting them to come in the type of playoff format that they would be coming in mid-April, coming directly off of an 82-game regular season, you're sadly mistaken. I mean, I believe you're going to see a lot of how they would look coming into the season to begin these playoffs. So, I mean, it really depends on how the quality of play is going to go here for me, right? Are we going to see those exciting, thrilling games, or are we going to see games where we're like, these guys, they don't look like they're ready to play? And that's what a lot of this comes into question for me. And Nick, before you answer, Scott, you mentioned about, and I've been mentioning all throughout the broadcast about how numbers are rising in the state of Florida.
Right.
Well, here's the concerns for you, ladies and gentlemen, and why you should be concerned about sports coming back in Florida and sports coming back in general and everything opening back up in general. I just received a notification that a Tampa Bay Buccaneers assistant coach, has tested positive for COVID-19, and 2 other assistants are being quarantined. There you go. It's just how serious with the numbers in Florida alone that are on the rise right now.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing, too, Xavier, and yeah, we're going to see more of this. Have any of you guys paid attention to the Korean Baseball League? I've actually enjoyed watching the Koreans play. You know, you get an idea what the simulation would look like with no fans with baseball. And believe it or not, don't laugh at that league because Matt Williams, the former Washington Nationals coach with the Giants, is actually managing one of those teams. Eric Thames played there for 3 years, and how did he do when he came up with the Milwaukee Brewers? Those are a couple of guys. Dixon Machado is over there. So I've enjoyed watching the Korean baseball organization. Have you guys paid attention to it? If you're a baseball fan, and of course they're getting a boatload of exposure. There have been a lot of pretty good players that have come over. So I think it's almost been like another way to identify talent in Korea. You guys have any thoughts about that?
Well, I've been able to watch a few of the games, and they've been very entertaining, more refreshing content. I'll tell you this, it's a lot better than watching replays and reruns of World Series games that were played in 2000 and 2001 and 1995 and 1991 and 1987. It's a lot more refreshing than just that.
What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I've not spent any time watching Korean baseball, but not for me, I never laugh at any high level of sports. I mean, these are professional athletes. They're getting paid. And granted, we may be a little spoiled here. We got the NFL, take away the MLS, and we essentially have the most dominant league for every major sport. And, like, I will never laugh at a professional athlete. I think it's very cool that the Korean Baseball League's getting some publicity. Right. But as far as me watching it, that's not something I've really just...
Well, we know. Come on, Nick. We know it's not your sport. I just threw a curveball at you to see if you were paying attention to it. Then I think a basketball coach like you in Seattle, no, but what the heck, you know? So, yeah, and Xavier, I don't think there should be an asterisk for the NBA champion. I'll tell you why. They've had work stoppages before, never gave them, and the NBA has played a fair amount of games. So I think they played lesser games and crowned a champion without an asterisk? I think so. I would say no asterisk for the NBA champion. I really would. So they played the majority of them. You know, and actually the silver lining is, how about those teams that didn't qualify for the postseason, the ones that had to stay home? They may be actually, even though they wish they could play a few more games and play with their younger players, they may actually make out better than anybody. They don't have to worry about the risk to begin with, and they can focus on the direction of what they want to do with their franchise, whether it's hire executives, coaches, or whatnot. So I don't feel bad for the ones that got left out. They're looking towards 2020-21. Where they're not nervous about what's going to happen in Orlando. They're just starting for next year. Nick, you're a basketball coach. What do you think about what I just mentioned?
I think if you're talking about, actually, could you re-ask that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you think that there should be an asterisk, Nick, with this year's champion?
Oh, yeah. I personally do not believe so. I think that because they all
you do or don't. You do or don't feel they need an asterisk? I want to clarify.
I feel that there should be no asterisk.
Okay, thank you.
The reason why, all these teams are playing on a level playing field, and I agree with what Xavier said as well. May disagree on the asterisk point, but yeah, the quality of basketball is not going to be the same. There's no way. I mean, but in terms of an asterisk, I think of guys who've been caught cheating. I think of like a Barry Bonds and the steroid scandal, Sammy Sosa steroids and a cork bat, and just things of that nature. Maybe a Bill Belichick Spygate thing, which somehow he gets away with, but that's a whole other story for a whole other day. Right. But again, they're starting on the same playing field. Everyone's in the same circumstances, whether it is the protests, the coronavirus situation, the shortened season, the injury recovery time. Every team right now is on the same level. And that's one of the beautiful things about life, is change is a natural part of life. And like Xavier said, yeah, they probably haven't been able to play basketball, but hopefully, knowing that the season was never fully suspended, that a lot of these guys stayed in shape. And I heard a very interesting point from an ESPN analyst talking about how this is where having a veteran coach, like a guy like a Doc Rivers, could really help. Because there's some veteran leadership, and I love Doc Rivers personally. I think that it'll allow the team to stay focused, stay cohesive. Maybe you're not executing on the court, and you're not going to find that same level of synchronicity between the players. But if you're studying the playbook, you're working out every day, you're eating, you're staying engaged with your teammates via Zoom calls, whatever it may be, there's some other ways to build team camaraderie. And for the teams that have been doing so, it'll probably show dividends on the court, whereas the teams who haven't, it'll probably hurt. And again, since they're all coming from the same the same playing field with the same circumstances, I believe that an asterisk should not be included, and that should only be for cheating type circumstances. Fair enough.
Okay, so with that said, unless you have something to say, Xavier, then I want to add another point. Go ahead. You want to add to that?
No, I've said all I need to say on that.
Okay, no problem. With that said, I know initially the NBA talked about Las Vegas. Do you feel that Orlando was the right place to make this happen, knowing full well that Disney is a resort, or do you think another alternative should have been in play?
I definitely believe that another alternative should have been in play here, because Florida has been one of the hot spots of this virus since the start of the pandemic anyway. Listen, they were going to go into a metropolitan bubble anyway. Orlando is not the biggest city in Florida, but it is one of the more well-known cities in Florida. It is one of the metropolitan areas in the state of Florida. The leagues were going to make their comebacks in the metropolitan areas. That was just going to happen. But I'm not sure what exactly the alternative plan could have been here to be put in place.
Well, I think Las Vegas.
I knew Vegas wasn't going to work.
Okay.
And I was actually surprised that it came back in Orlando because I'm just really intrigued, and I'm waiting to see what the scenery is going to look like once they are out there on the playing court.
Well, I mean, you ever been to ESPN's Wide World of Sports, Xavier?
No, I have not.
Yeah, I have. I'll tell you what, it's an incredible facility. I saw Tigers and Atlanta Braves game over at the baseball stadium, and I saw it's a pretty cool place. I think that area is definitely equipped, and they certainly have a lot of good resorts in there. So I actually thought Vegas would have been a possibility because you had a couple of full-fledged arenas. You had the UNLV Stadium, Thomas and Mack, and then you had the T-Mobile Arena out there. So you would have had two viable ones there. So, but I think actually in the end, Orlando is probably the best place you can because you keep them, because you have a lot of shops in the area. I believe in that area. They've got a lot of restaurants. So I think that was a pretty good spot. So, anything else you guys want to add? You want to talk about predictions? Or you want to wait for another broadcast for that?
I'll wait another broadcast for that because I'd like to see just where we're going to get in the developments of all of this. Are the players going to play? Are they not going to play? I want to see how many more developments we have that come out with that because that's really going to determine if this really happens or not.
So, Nick, go into more details about you being a basketball coach. I think the audience would appreciate your experiences as a coach. I know we wanted to wait till the end for them to learn more about you. We realize that you're a fledgling media guy, but, tell people the different parts of Nick Bartlett. I want everybody to get to know you as a part of our team now.
Yeah, so I do a wide variety of stuff. I'd say my full-time day job, technically speaking, at least prior to the COVID-19 circumstances, I'm in a very grateful position to be at. I'll just leave it at that. But I work with autistic kids in a school district as well as write for multiple media sites. And then I'm involved right now currently with two basketball teams. I'm a head coach for a JV team at the 7th grade as of last year and an assistant coach for a 7th grade varsity team on the boys' side. And prior to that, I was an assistant coach for a girls' team at a younger age, a 5th grade group, I believe it was. And, man, just coaching basketball for me, when I graduated college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My degree was pretty solid, actually. That's why, again, I thought it was cool that Xavier was mentioning news broadcast. I went to Washington State University, great news broadcast school. But for me, I always loved the sports element, and my dream job was always to coach basketball. And so I would just kind of put the pieces together to figure out how to make it happen. And I don't regret a minute of it. Coaching these kids has been absolutely amazing. But in terms for me, and the exciting thing here is I think a lot of coaches get into it and they have this mindset of, I need to be the best. I need to win. And don't get me wrong, I prefer to win, and I'm grateful that my teams have had success. But that's not what coaching is about, man. It's about the kids. And everyone says that. Every single coach says that. But it is really about the kids. I mean, we were blessed last year, and here's a story, and actually an article I wrote a while back. And one of my favorite stories, we had this kid last year, and I'll change his name. We'll call him John for today. He is a fringe JV and varsity player. And, again, this is 7th grade, so they're in that probably the last year of boyhood before they become really men, start kind of developing other aspects of their life. And so we're trailing the whole game. My team's 1-2 at this standpoint, and we're playing 3 guys on a JV 7th grade level who are at least like 6'4". And I'm like, come on, are you serious? And so this guy on our team, again, we'll call him John, he is struggling. He's our team captain. He is like 0 for 20, man. The guy cannot buy a shot. He just looks at me and the assistant coach. It's like, what do I do? It's like, shoot the ball. You are our best shooter on this team. He's like, no, coach, I'm going to pass to other teammates. And I just look at him. John, this is not an option. You are going to shoot the ball if you are open. And sure enough, come 4th quarter, after seriously, kid could not buy a bucket. Couldn't hit a freaking barn, man. He had 2 3-pointers and scored another layup, scored about 8 points in, 2 minutes. We ended up winning the game by 1 point. And yeah, the win was cool. But the thing about being a coach is seeing the change in that kid over a 10-minute real life span. You're looking at a shy, quiet kid to a kid, and I'm getting goosebumps as I say this right now, to a kid who's bright eyes and a smile. It changed me. It changed everything. Just seeing that, that's what being a coach is about, helping these kids get confidence in whatever it may be. I'm the first to tell any of my kids, you know what, if you don't want to play basketball, if you're just doing this because your parents are making you, or you want to look cool, or you want to impress a girl, that's fine. I respect that. I'm here to help you. I mean, again, I was getting pretty much towards the end of it either way, is you're just looking at developing kids and really not beating them up. There's a lot of this old school mentality where you need to like assassinate a person's character, call them weak, say they can't do things. You need to build these kids up because we don't know what they're going through, especially with these circumstances going on in the world. So to really summarize, being a basketball coach is just truly amazing. And the opportunity to help kids who may have not found direction in their life yet is really what it's all about. And win or lose, as long as I do my best to help these kids develop, that's something I can live with.
Yeah, let me add a couple things here, okay? First of all, I spent time as an assistant coach for like one semester for Oakland Community College, and I helped a young guy correct his free throw shooting woes and had him in the other side of the gym. And it was all concentration is what free throw shooting is about. Other than that, as a basketball person, I played 1 year growing up as a kid, and of course I've covered it my whole life. And I know Xavier and I have talked about the NBA on numerous shows. So, all right, with that said, anything else you guys want to talk about with the NBA, or you think we've covered it pretty well?
I believe we've covered it pretty well, and I'd like to just take this time once again to welcome Nick to our family. It's been a great first show with all of us here, and I'm really excited for the great things that we're all going to do here.
All right, so let me go ahead with that said. Okay, Nick, you're the new guy on the block. Why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you? Then Xavier will do the same, and then I will talk about how they get a hold of us, and then we'll be able to wrap up the broadcast, okay? Nick, lead it off. Let people know how they get a hold of Nick Bartlett.
So Twitter at Words by Bartlett. So at Twitter at WORDSBYBARTLETT, and that's probably the best way to reach me.
Xavier, take it from there.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at XTMCKNIGHII. The two I's at the end are capitalized. You can follow me on Instagram at XMCKNIGH22. You can send me a friend request on Facebook at Xavier McKnight. And you can also send me a follow request on LinkedIn just simply also by typing in Xavier McKnight.
All right, and myself, well, you can reach us at Tribune South on Twitter. That's where I connected with Nick. Glad I did. Looking forward to having him on the team. On Facebook, like South Florida Tribune. Instagram, subscribe to us on for South Florida Tribune, or follow us on Instagram, YouTube channel. I'm actually going to be putting a lot of those together real soon. I actually had one on Sunday, and I'll be doing more, but you can subscribe to us, the YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. The website is www.southfloridatribune.com. We have a lot of good content from our media distribution partners, our writers, and you can also find the broadcast under the WSAN drop-down. Our email address is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth. You are listening to the Sports Exchange on the WSAN network, and you can also find these broadcasts wherever you can get your podcasts as well. So on behalf of Xavier McKnight, the X-Man, and Nick Bartlett, we're glad we had a chance to talk about the NBA. I hope you will get the benefit, and I'm looking forward to another broadcast as the season gets going. But meanwhile, it's been a great time with both of you guys, and I'd like to think we accomplished a lot of things on this broadcast. Not only were we able to talk about the NBA, but I think it was okay to have a little carryover show, Xavier, from the real and the rare, where we were able to talk about the social injustice, because this is a situation that's simply not going to go away, and nor should it, because, again, we're seeing it right before our eyes all the time. And you know what? I think you have to draw attention to Black Lives Matter, because I do believe that Black Lives Matter. And Xavier, I know you're passionate about it. You see it. And, Nick, obviously you understand it as well. I mean, you live out in the Washington area. How much of an effect does Black Lives Matter out in Washington before we wrap things up?
So I'll be the first to admit, I think a lot of people don't realize this. The South definitely is a lot stronger and more prevalent African-American community. I think because Seattle, is typically more liberal based with their political beliefs, that they think there's a large African American community. It's definitely very small. My particular neighborhood is very diversified, something that I've been very grateful for in growing up in. And for me, I think the Black Lives Matter movement really matters anywhere. But for me, kind of one thing I'm very grateful for in this situation is I knew how diverse my community was. But now that this has really been brought to the forefront of attention, I see all the Black faces in my community, and I just maybe feel and do my best to understand that I don't understand their situation, but I'm here to support and listen.
All right, well, I'll end it on that note, guys, because I think we had a really, really good show. We did cover a tremendous amount of ground. Now, like I said, we covered basketball. We had talked about the Black Lives Matter. So, obviously, in future NBA broadcasts, we'll find out who's going to do what, who's going to do when. Will seniors be allowed to coach, as of the three guys that I mentioned? But on behalf of Xavier McKnight and Nick Bartlett, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, wishing you a good evening. And for all you fathers out there, I wish all the fathers out there a happy Father's Day. And please be safe, because I'll tell you what, COVID-19 better be taken seriously, or we're going to be reading a lot more than we want to pertaining to the subject. Good night, everybody, from the Sports Exchange. Once again, Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, Nick Bartlett, the new kid on the block, and the X-Man, the Xavier McKnight, my son, and I'm proud of Xavier McKnight. All right? Good night, everybody, from the WSAN Network and the South Florida Tribune. Bye-bye.